I'm leading my company as the first scout in a battle. 400 guys or so, all lined up as far apart as you could get, would still see somebody next to you. And I'm out in front of my company looking for Japanese and waiting for them to shoot at us. And I'm saying to myself, what am I doing here?
You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
To meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
The American Veterans Center thanks Brilliant for supporting this video. Brilliant has thousands of interactive lessons on topics such as logic, physics, and math, all critical survival skills used on the battlefield and in life. To get started for free, visit brilliant.org/American Veterans Center.
I grew up in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey, and went to 6 grammar schools. A lot of moving in those days. Anyway, and I joined the Marines. Well, it was a sunny Sunday afternoon. I was working at a gas station on a highway, and at about 2 o'clock, we got the news that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And my thoughts were, well, they're crazy. I knew where Pearl Harbor was, and a lot of people didn't, but I knew. And I said, they're crazy. The Japanese, this is not going to last long. Over the next 3 or 4 months, the Germans were sinking so many of our oil tankers coming up from Louisiana and Texas up to Jersey for the refineries. They'd sit off Atlantic City in New Jersey or Baltimore, wherever. And at night, the cities were all lit up, and there were silhouettes. They sank about 50 or 60 of these small tankers they used to use. It was amazing. A bunch of young kids, 17, 18, all over the country, immediately joined the Marine Corps. And I was amazed because later, when I found this all out, they joined like in January and February, and most of those guys were in the 1st Division that landed on Guadalcanal in August. And they beat the Japanese, who had never been beaten in 1,000 years. In all their wars that they had fought, never were beaten. And these guys, 6 months in the Marine Corps, and they beat them. So, of course, the Marines had a good bunch of NCOs and skilled people, but there were only 20,000 of them in 1940. So they did it. They did quite a job. I was very impressed. So that impressed me right off the bat. 2 of my friends and I were busy debating what we were going to do. We weren't draft age yet, but in another year or so we'd be drafted. So they said to me, well, let's go join the Marines. Okay. So they talked me into it, see? And we went to New York, and we went through all the exams, and they flunked the physicals. One had a heart murmur, and one had something else. They weren't really too bad, but the Marines wouldn't take them. But I passed. So Later on, I'm on Bougainville, and I'm leading my company as the first scout in a battle. And there's 2 companies abreast. That means 400 guys or so, all lined up as far apart as you could get, would still see somebody next to you. And I'm out in front of my company looking for Japanese and waiting for them to shoot at us. And I'm saying to myself, what am I doing here when Red is flying a plane somewhere and Goldie's in the Seabees eating all that good chow, and here I am waiting to get shot. So it really struck me. Those guys, and so they called me in August. So August 12th, I went to Paris Island and spent 8 weeks, and the last 2 weeks with firing a rifle, and 6 weeks before that, learned how to march and all that. And then went to New River, North Carolina, which is now Camp Lejeune. Lived in tents. Found out the mosquitoes were worse than the Jersey mosquitoes, which I didn't think was possible, but they were bad. We were in the swamps on the coast of North Carolina, and I didn't like that. And after 2 months, we were sent to California and spent, November, December, January, about 2.5 months there. We went from there on the Lure line, which is a big ocean liner in the Pacific, of the Matson lines coming out of Hawaii. And there were 5,000 Marines on it, and we went to New Zealand. And we got there in about 13 days, which is very, very fast, let me tell you. But I asked my lieutenant when we were leaving San Diego Harbor, I said, where's all our convoy? I was half kidding, but he said, we don't have any ships anymore. So the only thing that happened, I learned 2 things. I learned you don't wash your hair with salt water. The showers with salt water, and I didn't even think about it. And man, I couldn't get that soap out of my hair for a week. It was tough. So you didn't wash your hair with soap in salt water. The other thing was, one night about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up And I look out, and there's a big flare just went up outside in the ocean. I could see it out the side. And the ship immediately turned port and started to move. And I mean, everything was vibrating. It was amazing. And I found out later they were doing 40 knots. Now, in an ocean liner, in any ship, 40 knots is pretty fast. I'm going to tell you. Even the fastest aircraft carriers only went 38 knots. And that was much more modern than the Matson liner. Anyway, we escaped from the submarine. There was a submarine in laying in wait for us. He knew we was coming. We were coming. I don't know how, but he knew. And he missed us. So we got to New Zealand, and the people were wonderful. What was it? In the city, it looked like San Diego to me. And the problem was they drove on the wrong side of the street. So that gave me a problem later when I tried to drive there. But anyway, they put us in a camp about 50 miles north of the main city, Auckland, or that main city. We were there 4 months and went on 60-mile hikes, which drove me crazy. Because on a 60-mile hike, you're camping out overnight, which means you carry a blanket, a half a tent, all your equipment, everything. And that's very heavy. So a 20-mile hike, you go out and come back, you don't have to carry all that stuff. So that's the difference. The second 60-mile hike we were ready for. We were prepared. So the first night we got out, we had guard duty to guard our little encampment where we had. So I got the 6 to 9, 6 to 9, 6 to 10 shift. And so I traded it to somebody for the 2 to 6 shift so I could go out. And so I sneaked out. I had another guy and we had to crawl past the guards so they didn't see us, legitimately. We walked up the road, and my friend picked us up with his car, drove us to his house, and here we are eating steak and eggs and having a great old time. And he brings me back at like 1:30, about quarter to 2, and I sneaked back into the camp quietly. I put on my 782 gear, they called it, took my rifle, my helmet, and I had to go on guard duty. So, I had walked all day, 20 miles, and under this burden, spent all evening out. Then I do guard duty. Then at 6 o'clock, and then we eat breakfast, which was nothing much. And then we walk another 20 miles. So I was pretty tired. I can't believe to this day that I did that, but I did. And then we left and went to Guadalcanal in July, and spent till November training in the jungles. And then they sent us to Bougainville, which was a larger island closer to Rabaul, which was north of us. And Rabaul was where the great Japanese base was. They had an ocean base, a sea base there for ships, and they had airplanes like crazy. They used to bomb Guadalcanal all the time, and that was a big center for the Japanese. And it was so strong, we didn't want to attack it directly. So we took the island of Bougainville, or part of it, and they landed where the Japanese would figure we wouldn't land, in a swamp. See? And so they didn't have too much defense there. Their defense was where the good beaches were and so forth, solid ground. Our division, the 3rd Division, went in on like November 1st, and my battalion, I guess, just my battalion, was reserve, and we went in about the 10th of November. We landed, we had no resistance. The first guys had resistance, a lot of fighting. And we went up a jungle trail, and there was an ambush, and I was circling around. We were all trying to encircle the Japanese that had ambushed the guys. And I'm crawling along through this swamp, and nobody around me, and I know where I'm going. That's it. And along comes a guy diagonally from the back of me, crawling. I didn't know him. I never saw him before. He crawled right in front of me. And as soon as he got in front of me, he got shot right in the head. So he saved my life. I mean, although I don't know why he crawled there. And I had noticed as I was crawling along that I heard a snap. Snap. What's this snap? The only time I ever heard that was when I was in what they call the butts in the rifle range, where you're down underneath the target, changing the target. And I thought the snap was the bullet hitting the paper. I always assumed that. But I found out what it was. It was actually the bullet going past my ear. That's what they call the sound thing, when the planes hit the sound barrier. That's when I found that out. We dug in that night, and that was the first night in combat. And I tell you, every shadow seemed like it was a Japanese sneaking up on us. So guys were firing rifles and all night long. I found out later, every new unit that gets into combat did that. And we'd hear them in the distance saying, "Oh, those boots over there, they don't know what they're doing." But we went through that. It was terrible. I swore I saw a platoon of Japanese walking up a tree right in front of me, and there was nobody there. So anyway, we had that. We had a second battle where the whole battalion was lined up. So we had two companies. Now that's 200 guys each, lined up side by side and one back in reserve. And we were all in what they call a skirmish line, which means like you're all side by side. You're not in line like a column, you're side by side. And so you could only see maybe the guy next to you, or maybe two guys, and that was it, because it's all bushes and jungle. I was first scout in front of my company, and there was another one in front of another platoon. Each platoon had a platoon is a portion of a company. Each platoon had their own first scout. You couldn't see them. They were camouflaged, and the first you knew they were there is they shot you. And so fortunately, there was nobody in front of me, but the next guy over, there was. And his buddy threw a hand grenade, and it bounced off a tree and right back next to his leader. And with this southern accent, he read him off. All you could hear was this guy, "You so-and-so, learn how to throw a grenade," and all that. And then we looked and we saw one of our tanks. We had little tanks. They weren't Shermans. They were smaller, and they had like 30 caliber cannon on them instead of 75 like the Shermans did. And the Japs, it got bogged down, and the Japs came running over, and one had a sword, and he's trying to stab the tank. Well, when I found one of their tanks later on, I could see why, because they were pretty flimsy. But our tanks he couldn't stab. And then other Japs came along and with magnetic mines and put them on the side and tried to blow the tank up, and we shot them. So the tank guy came out and thanked us for that later on. But I figured this is no place for tanks. We got pulled out of line, and about an hour later, we had to rush up, fill in a spot where our other battalion was having a trouble, and we dug in along a ridge. But we had a rush, so we didn't have our mess gear and all that stuff. All we had was our grenade belt and cartridge belt with ammunition and our rifles, steel helmets, that's all. They said, leave it, you'll get it tomorrow. And so we never got it. That's the story. So we're on line, and tomorrow was Thanksgiving. And Roosevelt that year said everybody that's fighting, every fighting person, man, would have a Thanksgiving dinner. Mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, the whole works. And so we didn't know much about this until we got stationed on that line. And then the cook comes along with it, and we have no mess gear, no knives and forks, no nothing. And so one of the guys, Frenchy Gautier, was a guy from Cajun country down in Louisiana, and a good friend of mine. And he said, that's nothing. He takes a banana leaf and he shapes it and folds up the edges. And so we all ate on banana leaves with our bayonets. That was our Thanksgiving dinner. See? So we stayed on that line for 6 weeks because we were just holding this perimeter for Bougainville so they could build the airports, the 2 airstrips, one for the bombers and one for the pursuit planes. We had a good defensive line with a double apron barbed wire fence, which means if you look at it from the end, it looks like a tent. And the walls are made of wires, and there's posts in the middle. So, and it zigzags. So they had a machine gun at the base of it on each end of one angle. So anybody trying to get through there would have 2 machine guns shooting at them. See? So we had gone to Bougainville in November 10th or so, and came on January 10th. They put us on a ship. We went to Guam. Now, we were 47 days on those ships, and I had traded a sailor. When I first got on the ship, I gave him my bayonet, my Japanese bayonet I had found somewhere, and gave it to the sailor, and he gave me his hammock. So I slept on deck in a hammock the whole time, so I was very comfortable. Everybody else either slept on the iron deck or down below, which was steaming hot. So I took care of that. When we were in New Zealand, we went on night hikes a lot. And we'd be walking through cattle grazing fields and all that stuff. And every time we'd reach a gate on the pasture, the captain would open the gate, and he'd pass the word. He'd say, last man close the gate. And he'd whisper this. So imagine what it sounded like if the 200 guys went in line. Anyway, it became a great gag. When we were going to land on Guam, now, we hadn't been too battle shaken, should I say, by the Bougainville one. We had some casualties, and it was serious and so on, but it wasn't any horrible kind of a thing, see, except for the guys that got hurt. But so when we were going to land, we had to climb down the cargo nets to get into the boats. One guy had stolen a box of cigars from the captain's quarters somewhere, I don't know where. And so he opens this up, and everybody's smoking cigars that smoked. And I had a gallon can of orange juice under my dungaree jacket with everything else climbing down this net. So I open up and we're drinking orange juice, and they're drinking cigars. And it was not a party, but it was relaxed time, and they're all, okay, fine. Nobody was sweating it out. And we got almost to the shore. There's a coral reef, and the boats couldn't get over it. So they had alligators, which are tractor tanks, like tractors, open top. And so we climbed into them, and we're starting to go ashore in that. And the one right next to us got blown up, Japanese mortar shell. Now, they're shooting at us, too, but that one got hit. And so bullets are going by. And so he pulls up on land, the guy does, and the first guy out jumps out the front, and he hollers back, "Last man closed the gate." And so we all start laughing. And we're landing. We're getting shot at, and we're laughing. So that was our storm landing, which is supposed to be very serious. It was different on Iwo Jima, but we'll get to that. We're the third wave, and we had to go in just so far to the bottom of the cliffs and wait until the other waves came in, and then we were supposed to climb. They were steep, very steep hills, and the whole division was side-by-side landing. And finally, about dawn, it was kind of quiet. And I'm looking over there, and I see a guy standing on the top of that hill with his hands on his hips, looking our way, and he had a Japanese hat on. They had a soft hat that was kind of distinctive. So I figured, I hope that's a Japanese. I think it is. So I grabbed my BAR, which I had picked up at the beach. That's a Browning automatic rifle, and it fires 20 rounds in a hurry if you want it. And I was supposed to carry an M1, which is a single-shot rifle that carries 8 rounds. So I aimed at the guy, and I got him. It was on semi-automatic. I didn't know it. And it had a tracer bullets in it, which I didn't know. So when I aimed at the guy right here and figured if there's a rise, when you fire an automatic weapon, it rises a little bit. See, I think, well, I'll get him this way, see. And he was about 150 yards away, quite a ways. And it hit him right, this tracer went right through, right exactly where I aimed it. I was amazed. I figured there must be a lot of guys behind that hill, because if he's up there alone. So I had a rifle grenade that I stuck on the end of my rifle, and we only practiced it a couple of times, and you couldn't aim it with a sight. You had to put it in the ground like this and kind of judge. And sure enough, the grenade went up and landed exploded just past the hill. So if anybody was under it, they would have got killed. So I don't know if we got anybody else in that. Then they took us around the mountain to a little road where there were all these foxholes, empty, but some had bodies in them, and some had blood in them. And it was all along this road, and it was an embankment that, because there was this embankment, then there was the road, then another embankment. The road went this way, and the enemy was directly ahead. I couldn't imagine what killed these guys. They were our second platoon. The company commander said, "You guys get in those holes." So picked one, I gave 2 to my other 2 guys that were with me, and I looked at it, and it was dug into the embankment. So that means the back of the hole was level with the ground, and the front of it was like 3 feet deep because of the embankment. You see, it was dug in the side. So I said, "You guys better dig. I don't know what killed these guys, but there's something wrong here. So dig." And they said, "We're tired. We're not going to dig." So I spent about 5 minutes digging like crazy. Well, within the 5 minutes, all of a sudden you hear boom, boom, and a loud boom right next to me. It killed both of those guys because they hadn't dug. They were exposed. And it blew me out of the foxhole. I found myself standing up, and I was wounded in the leg and the arm. And they sent me to the beach. "Can you walk?" "Yes, I can walk." They sent me to the beach, and I went on board ship for about 3 days and missed all the bonsai attacks. Thank goodness. At night, they came rushing in and screaming and bayoneting people and so forth. And our guys hung on, but it was battle. Now, I found out what that was all about. There had been a cannon in the side of this hill overlooking these foxholes in a cave. When they'd fire the cannon, they'd pull it back in the cave and close the door. And so you couldn't even see where they were. And the captain had called in a flight of planes that came down and strafed and bombed this thing, but they were inside the cave. So they left, but one pilot stayed in the cloud. And they came out, they didn't see anybody, so they fired, and they only got 3 rounds off, and he came screaming down with rockets, and he knocked them out. So it saved the lives of the rest of the guys in that line, but not my 2 guys. And that was quite a shame. So, and then from there on, when I came back, they had been through all this bonsai attacks. 26 guys actually got killed out of 200. Then we proceeded up the rest of the island with not much resistance. And so we spent 4 months. We killed 10,000 Japanese in 4 months after the island was secured. We'd have a battalion, that's 1,000 guys, inside of a barbed wire that circled them. And the barbed wire was extensive. And we'd go out every day patrolling, and then at night we put guards on the barbed wire. Now, the Japanese were starving. They were very hungry. So they were always poking around looking for something to eat. One night, we were on guard duty on the barbed wire, and I hear bang, bang up the line, a little Corporal of the Guard, post number 7. Then I hear silence, and then bang, bang, a little closer. Corporal of the Guard, post number 8, and then 9, and I'm 10. And so I was, oh, what's coming now? And you couldn't see a thing. It was black. And I'm listening and watching, and very tense. And I see sparks where the guy was walking. Some guy was walking along, and he had hobnailed boots on, and they were hitting, and I could see a few sparks. So I took a shot, 2 shots. I didn't hit him. And all of a sudden, I hear a lot of commotion, and it's thrashing around, and zoom, then quiet. Now, the Corporal of the Guard never got there, but the next day, they didn't believe us. They didn't believe that there was inside the wire, see. And I went down and looked, and I saw where the wire had been bent and all, and I showed my lieutenant. He finally believed me. But the captain didn't believe us, and he passed a rule that said, you gotta have a body. If you're going to shoot your rifle, you bring in a body, or you got trouble. February, we took off from Iwo Jima, and we were floating reserve for Iwo Jima, and they told us, it'll be a piece of cake. You guys won't be needed at all.
And now a quick message about our sponsor, Brilliant. Without support like theirs, we couldn't bring you weekly stories from our battlefield heroes. Brilliant is the best way to learn math, science, and computer science interactively. If you're looking for an engaging experience to sharpen your mind and build on your problem-solving skills, Brilliant is for you. In time-sensitive scenarios, you need to be able to make the right decision with the options available, which is why we recommend their course on logic. The material in this course will help you uncover how to identify what's the truth based on mathematical reasoning. Brilliant has thousands of lessons with exclusive new content added monthly. To get started for free, visit brilliant.org/American Veterans Center or click on the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription.
D-Day, the 19th. The 20th, we had to get into the Higgins boats to go ashore. Now, that's just the regiment, my regiment, the 21st Marines. And we spent all day on Higgins boats in 5-6 foot waves, most of the guys getting seasick, circled around all day long. And then they couldn't fit us on shore. There was so much clutter and wrecked stuff on the beach. There was no room for us. So we had to go back to the ship, climb up the cargo. Next day we went again. This time coming down the net, one of the guys fell into the water, and one of my friends took off his pack, dove in, brought the guy up, saved his life, and then remembered he couldn't swim. We went ashore. In the evening, we stayed on the beach until it was dark. We walked across the first landing field that they had taken, and the 5th Marines had taken the day before, and dug in along the second airfield, which was a very, very tough nut to crack. They really didn't capture that airfield for another a week or 10 days. But anyway, that first night we were dug up along there until dawn. We were supposed to attack and take the airfield the next morning after a terrific artillery barrage that we fired. We got up and we went 1 yard. and they fired so much stuff at us we couldn't even move. So we jumped back in holes and waited, see. I happened to jump in what I thought was a well. I looked, and it was 5 feet deep, and it was solid, dry. I said, this is terrific. I'll stay right here all day. What I didn't know at the time, and didn't dawn on me for quite a while, it was an entrance to one of their underground tunnels. They had miles of tunnels underneath, connecting almost everything. All the different caves were connected, and they could move their men around. And when you blew up a cave, they'd come back later and reopen it behind our lines and all that business. So I was very lucky. If I'd have been there that night, they would open that trapdoor to come out, I would have fallen in. So I didn't realize how lucky I was. A truck pulls up behind me, a recon truck, and the guy says, and he's only about 20, 30 feet away, but behind a little hill. And he says, watch this. And he fires off about 50 rockets, or 40, or how many are held, I don't know. Oh, shoo! And he brushes his hands. He says, well, so long. He turns the truck around, and he leaves. Well, in about 5 minutes, the Japanese, they must have thought it was an artillery battalion put in there or something, because so many came. And they, for 5 hours, 6 hours, all they did was throw cannons and mortars. And it was like the 4th of July when it's going to rain, and they get rid of all the fireworks at once, and loud booms all around me, and just unbearable. And at the end of it, I had all pins and needles all over my body. That's what it felt like when your foot's asleep and it wakes up, that's. So I said to my sergeant, hey, I got something wrong, I don't know what it is. And he says, see the corpsman? I went to the corpsman, and he sent me to the beach. Another guy and I walked to the beach, and they said, put me on board ship. I guess they gave me a shot, I don't remember. 2 days later, I'm still on board. I'm watching over the rail. I'm watching a tank over here with a flamethrower firing it, and some guys running over there. I look at Mount Surabachi, and then I look back, and they get the flag up. And I said, oh, another time, man, those guys are crazy. They're going to get killed. That's what I said when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. But I really believed that. I said, oh, and all the whistles on the boats went off and all, but I thought they were crazy. Then they called off on names, 20 guys that were able-bodied. See, I was dragged off because what I found out later was what they now call post-traumatic something or other. We call it combat fatigue. A lot of guys get it now. I guess the 3 battles summed it up. I guess, I don't know. They called out 20 names, and we get on a lifeboat. We're going to go down davits. We never had that before. You always had to climb down. And we're halfway down, and the captain hollers, "Avast! What's going on?" And they said, we're taking these men ashore, Captain. He says, no, you're not. It's too late. The sunset's a few minutes now coming up, and we got to get out of here. We got to get to Saipan with all these wounded guys. So that was the end of the war for me. I would have gone back and got killed, maybe, see? So the captain saved my life. I mean, I wouldn't say I was not afraid, but I was uncomfortable going back. For the next 60 years, I felt guilty about leaving these guys there. I thought they were all killed because, it was such a violent island. And here I walked off the island and I'm alive. I thought about that for a long time. I didn't talk about the war for many, many years. A lot of guys didn't. But we finally got together, and at one of the reunions, I met a guy who was a Marine, became a minister. He was talking about somebody else. The guy had complained to him. He says, I feel guilty. I shouldn't be here. I should be dead with all my buddies. And the minister said to him, well, do you believe in God? He said, oh, yes. He says, well, you're here because God wants you to be here. Otherwise, you would have been gone. So that's sort of solace to me. It eases things a little bit, but it's still, I don't feel too good about that. So anyway, that was my adventures on Iwo Jima.